in our book, The Jigsaw Man, our main protagonist, our protagonist, Michael J. Fox, goes through something called a hero's journey. It is not a direct translation of what author Edward Taylor's had wrote in his book for a hero's journey, but it's very similar. And most people probably wouldn't consider Michael a hero, but in the context of the story, he technically is. So the hero's journey is I would say, a cycle describing the journey that most heroes in literature or media goes through. The beginning is departure, then initiation, then return. But it isn't just those three simple steps. Usually it is broken down into many pieces for each step. The first step could have, obviously the beginning is call to adventure, and in most stories they have something called supernatural aid, or it could just be something that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, supernatural aid. And then there's initiation, which says the road of trials, which is the point in the story where the hero is challenged with something that he cannot overcome immediately and that he has to do it himself to do it. And also, there is another part in Initiation Part 2, which is called Woman of Temptress, which means that the hero is tempted with something that he really wants, and he has to decide whether he wants to be the hero for what he wants to be the hero for, or if he wants to basically just get what he wants in that moment, rather than get it in the long term, which is better in most stories. And number 3 is return, is when, and this section is a little interesting, because this part is where usually the first act of the third part is that the hero refuses to go back to where he originated from, but then in the end, he usually gets the freedom to do whatever he'd like and go home if he wants, go do whatever. So Michael's a little interesting because he has bits and pieces of the hero story that could be fit into a hero story, because the hero story could be so many different things. So he has obviously the call to adventure, because he goes to go kill himself at the beginning of the book, but Drake says, "Hey, I will give you $2 million for your arm." And like in the hero story, the hero could refuse to take the initial act for it, which Michael does, and initially he does, saying that it's insane that he would want my right arm for $2 million, just want my arm in general. And at the end of the first arc, like in The Jigsaw Man, is called the belly of the whale, which basically means that he is at the center of, I wouldn't say danger, but the stakes, basically tension, is built to the most here. He is the center of everything. And then number 2, or act 2, is where my personal favorite of any hero story is, where it shows you the real character of this person. It's called the Road of Trials. And in the Road of Trials, it's obviously when the hero is faced with things that he needs to figure out himself, or it shows that this person is a real hero. And in Michael's case, what he does is that he starts to figure things out slowly. He's in the facility, and he goes over to the room where the doctor's son is. And he wants to meet the doctor's son, and he saw that the guard had walked away to go to the bathroom, and he goes in. But this is his first trial, and his first trial is that he figures out that the doctor's son is a mannequin and isn't the real doctor's son, or if there even is one. So, and the trial here is not that he needs to figure out, or not that he figured out that the son wasn't real, but that what he should do next, and what he should do with this information. And he figures out what he needs to do, and what he does is that he starts to slowly try to interrogate Drake and the doctor at the breakfast scene in the next earlier. And this could be considered something called meeting with the goddess, which basically means the more powerful entity in, well, I wouldn't say entity, but the more powerful thing in the hero's journey. And then the end of part 2 or act 2 is usually called the ultimate boon, which means a boon is basically a negative, and there is bane and there is a boon. A bane is a positive, and a boon is a negative. And in Michael's case, his boon was when he was getting chased the whole entire way through the whole entire facility, and he got his arms cut off, and then he got his legs cut off. And then we got Act 3, which Act 3 is a little interesting in the way that it usually starts, which how similar it is Act 3, which usually starts with something called Refusal of the Return. And in Michael's case, if you originally read the story, there is no refusal to return, but there is. And the refusal to return, if you think about it, is that Michael is getting a body back. Because technically, he has a body with just the torso, but in this universe, and to most people's knowledge, it isn't considered a body all that much. So, and he refuses to take the body because it's his friend's body, but he doesn't want to take it. So that is one part of it. And then there is the rescue from without, which is basically the hero's journey that uses rescue without usually basically means that the hero brings themselves back, as if he knows this is the right decision. Michael doesn't necessarily have that, but what his rescue is that he breaks out and he starts killing everybody in the facility. And this is where we meet another thing called the crossing of the return threshold. Basically, where he is at the point where he cannot turn back. There is nothing he can do to fix anything that he has done. And this is where we get to the last 2 arcs of the third part, and which is Master of Two Worlds and Freedom to Live. Master of Two Worlds basically means that Michael, or the protagonist, has tamed the essence of the world that they live in, basically the hero's world, and they have also tamed the world that they're fighting against. And in this case, it is the facility, and Michael's world is and the first world is Michael's mind, and the second one is the facility. And Michael masters both of those worlds by killing everybody inside of the facility and then burning it down. Basically, he was a master enough to burn down the facility. And the last one is Freedom to Live. This is the point in the story where the hero decides he does whatever he wants with his life. And this is the point where Michael realizes, he looks at himself and just thinks to himself, if this body of mine were to get out to anybody, they could reverse engineer myself, and it would just go across the world, and it would be a cataclysm of just events that would go horribly wrong, and he doesn't want anybody else to go through that. So that's when we come back to Michael going in front of a train track and killing himself. And that's the point where we go full circle. And I think that is an accurate representation of how the hero's journey is usually portrayed in a lot of media with recurring stories, where a hero starts with a trial at the beginning. For example, let's use Harry Potter. In the beginning, he gets his sorcery powers, and he goes through his hero's journey in the first book. But then he constantly keeps on going through the hero's journey in every book. So I think this book represents the cycle, or I think this book figuratively represents the cycle of the hero's journey going through multiple media, where the hero saves the world, and then the world's back in danger. And then he saves the world's back in danger. He goes back to his life, world's in danger, comes back, saves it, world's in danger, and just a constant cycle of just rebirth of the same exact story over and over again. And that is why I very much enjoyed The Jigsaw Man.